microphone.
Okay, we're stabilizing now with some participants, so we may as well begin. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our very first Conversations with the Academy. And this conversation, Networking with Impact, by being from Western is Your Advantage, is between Dr. Christopher Brown, AM, and the Academy's Andrew Fong. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we gather today, including those of the Darug, Tharawal, Eora, and Gundungurra, and Wiradjuri peoples, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this conversation with the Academy. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and recognise and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands, water, and waters of Western Sydney and beyond. Over to Andrew, who will conduct the show.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good day, everybody. I'm very, very excited this morning to have a special guest with us here today. Before I dive in, though, to introduce him, we are recording today's session, so there's no need to take notes. This is not a lecture. Sit back, relax, be curious, and ask our guest speaker your pressing questions on how to network and how to make the most out of your contacts.
Well, they're all tested on this, Andrew.
There's a Q&A section at the very end as well. You guys can, pop that in progressively. We'll cover this towards the end of the session. We'll also cover on why being from Western Sydney is your competitive advantage and why you should be proud to be a Western Sydney student. And without further ado, to kick off the Conversations with the Academy series, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome the Executive Chairman of the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue, Dr. Christopher Brown, AM. Chris, great to have you with us.
Good morning, Andrew. Good morning, Jonathan.
Chris, I'm just reading through your bio out right now and going through that previously ahead of time. You're the member of the Order of Australia. You were once the Special Advisor to the UN Secretary General. Sorry. And you once chaired the Business Council of the UN World Tourism Organization. Some big, big things here. Also, up until recently, you were the Pro-Chancellor to the university. And the list goes on. And I'll never be able to do you justice by simply listing these achievements. So how about you tell everyone viewing this morning a bit about yourself?
I'm just a Westie that got lucky, mate. Standing on the shoulders of giants who went before. I continue to stand on the giants of people I work with. And probably, to today's subject, it's testimony to the value of networking. I was blessed to receive my honorary doctorate of letters at the university. I'm blessed more than most because it's the first degree I've ever got. So it's the only degree I've got. And therefore, that value of networking, of other softer skills, not lacking in the technical skills that I have or the technical qualifications, comes into focus even more. I've built a career out of, as a boy from Burnside Public at North Parramatta, Cumberland High at Carlingford, where most of your colleagues wouldn't understand, but it's the school of the great Ray Price, one of the great champions of the Parramatta Rugby League Football Club back in the day, serving most of the Dundas Valley housing estate, then the biggest public housing estate in the country. These days it's fashionably almost the Hills District, how Sydney has changed, but in those days it was very, very, very much the heart of the West. And essentially recognising that to get on, get up and get out there, it was going to take more people than more than I had alone. So what is networking? It's effectively the power to harness the connections to a cause, be it your own cause, be it the cause you're championing, a region or sector. It's often used as a pejorative term, it's just networking, or it's a networking event, meaning it's not really important, which I would challenge because as an advocate that I am, that's my skill set, to advocate for things publicly. Networking's everything because you're building on networks, on others to enlist to your cause. So it's more important probably. Us Westies don't grow up with a silver spoon in our mouth or any other part of us. It is, in fact, traditionally, and depending these days which part of the West you're at, that not all animals are equal. There's the snobbery that comes with that. There's the tyranny of distance that's achieved. But worst of all, there's the tyranny of confidence. And what I think we need to address, we spent some years now trying to make West is best, the sexiness of the suburbs resonate through. Probably we've convinced everybody to some extent other than people in the West in some parts. So the advocacy about the dominance, the Western Sydney used to be seen as Sydney's problem, now it's its solution in planning terms, employment terms. To have, when I first joined the WSU board, my first board meeting, I made myself pretty unpopular, telling everybody that my niece had just signed up, and she told me that then UWS, its name meant with respect, you went shit. And it was it was a place you went because you couldn't get somewhere else. In 8 to 10 years, the turnaround in that has been remarkable, absolutely remarkable. The standing of our institution now is been elevated multifold. But in all of the acceptance by government that this is Parramatta's the second CBD, West is the future, I think we might have forgotten a bit to bring some of our people with us to share that same confidence for the region. So that's I think I applaud what you're doing today with the subject today. It's a really important one that when graduates, particularly of the academy, let me tell you, this is the best of the best. When the academy graduates are out there, head high. I'm a product of the Western Sydney Uni Academy. This is the elite core of, not elitist, but elite core of the campus, and there should be no constraints on confidence, no cap on potential, no limitation on capacity, but chin out, eyes up, hand out, firm handshake, g'day, I'm from the academy. It looks like you could use my help.
Ooh, I was on mute there. No, that's amazing, Chris. Thank you so much. And you are a very strong advocate of Western Sydney, and I know from a fact that the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue has come out with the Best of the West publication. And if you don't mind, I'll provide with the students who've attended today with a PDF link to that copy, if that's okay. But you know, Chris, along the way, through these experiences that you've had, that you just shared, you've made some very valuable networks. You're probably one of the most connected people I know, and you know, you wine and dine with the big hitters of town. And I'm sure
too much whining and dining, that's the problem. But
it doesn't hurt. And I'm sure that all the students who are tuning in today, who you know, they're eager to understand more about how they can improve upon their own networking skills, right? And networking is very complex, but you put it in a very, very simple way there. My mum has always said, you know, a master of the art of anything is able to explain anything very simply. And you've done that very well, Chris. So
thank your mum, she's a smart lady. So if she says it, it must be true.
I've got a very, very easy question to begin with, Chris, for you. What are the most important skills students and young leaders should look at developing, you know, during their time at university? You did mention, you know, having that confidence there and having a firm handshake. But besides that, what are the core fundamental pillars you think is, you know, makes up networking 101? Like what makes it tick?
And at the risk of sort of getting, you know, imposter syndrome, I can't presume to speak on all matters of everything about leadership or confidence. I'll put on my hat as an employer, as an active employer of students in WSU and other places. Possibly by the time I see somebody in my organisation, they've been vetted, that they've ticked the technical box, that they have the requisite skill, and our organisation doesn't require an engineering degree or a medical degree or an accounting degree. In fact, my complaint is there's no degree for strategic thinking. There's no diploma for you know, strategic engagement or networking, things like that we do. But so by the time I get to see somebody who's been shortlisted and they're technically proficient, they can read, write, do it that has to be done, add up, etc. I can tell you in 2 minutes that person's going to get the job. It's two things. It's how they carry themselves, and it's what they've done outside the classroom. By virtue of being in the academy, it's a head start. I care about, and way too much education focus is on whether it's an ATAR, whether it's a high credit distinction, you name it. My 1 year of uni, I didn't get many of those, so I'm not quite sure the correct terminology these days. But it's about what you do as a human being. It's about the broader experience you have. It's about the commitment you've made to outside yourself. If someone's coming to work in my office, I want them part of my family. I want to know that they're going to sweat, bleed, and die for the people around them, for the causes we share. And I can see that in whether they've been involved in the student newspaper, if they've done charity work, if they've gone the extra mile. Any automaton, any idiot can sit there, read, write, learn, pass exams. I don't care for it. I really don't. I care for the human being that has gone outside themselves, pushed themselves, done something different, done something for other people, and that I think is in our advantage to be Westies. That is more. We've had to fight a little harder. It's not woe is me anymore, and it's not just a disadvantaged culture in the West. It's some of the most advantaged parts of the city, but there is still that binding thing that people of Bondi or Boston still look down their nose at us. So that does require a greater resilience. So I want confidence, I want resilience, I want the extra mile. And so when particularly academy students go out there, put it up front. I'm a member of the academy. I mean, this is a brand. It's a really important brand. It should be being used more often by our team. And they should be building a network. You don't have to become a CEO to start a network. In fact, get a CEO by having a network. So reach out now. Who's networking within the academy? To work the alumni. Who is reaching out to, if you've had people come and speak to the academy, which I've done, who's written them a note afterwards and said, I want to come, I know Andrew Fong has regularly. Who's thinking about how every person they come across, and I don't mean to be using them, and some people can take the thing too far and become a pest, right? You got to balance that. But way more are just too lazy to follow up. Way more sometimes don't know how to follow up. And I strongly encourage this type of educational base, which goes to resilience, confidence, networking stuff, rather than the 3 R's. What's the broader bit that's going to get you on in society? That's going to make you a better parent, a better worker, a better boss, better everything. Is these softer life skills that, and sadly, our crew have to learn a little harder. They're not born with natural networks. You'll ask people today why they send their kids to private schools, and you'll still get the thing of that old school tie network, building networks. Well, we've got a new school tie network at Western Sydney, and it ought to be being used, nurtured, leveraged, invested in at all times, and the academy's a vital part of that network.
Thanks, Chris. And, you touched upon, resilience, confidence, and these are all extracurricular skills that you can gain from basically extracurricular. And the university, Western Sydney University, and the academy in particular, we have many opportunities for students to develop these skills, whether it be joining a student club. Guys, if you want to join student clubs, events, build that leadership capacity, extracurricular activities, it's all available through Western Life. Sign up there. The academy has amazing opportunities, networking experiences, global travel experiences, post-COVID-19, of course, sponsored by the new Convo Plan, and the Citizen Scholar Award. Chris has spoken about the academy brand. It's a very exciting time now for us as a region, and not only as a region, but also as a university, to really get together, unite, and really build that strong cohort. So, Chris, thank you for that advice, and I think the students will really take that on board. And Chris, touching upon more a bit by yourself, but also aligning a bit to your previous response. In fact, we've hosted a lot of events, from Boomtown, the Out There Summit, and the Future Forum, among many others through the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue. You're very generous in your time in providing opportunities for the future generation, for them to grow and develop at these events. Because in the past, Western Sydney students have volunteered at these events, including myself.
Sure have.
Yep. And it's a great experience. And I'll highly recommend any student here to look at the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue website, their events, and also keep an eye out for the Academy e-news about potential opportunities to volunteer with the dialogue. You guys make incredible contacts by just attending, so I highly recommend that. Chris, at these events, you speak to many, many people, whether it be at these events or others. I have a two-part question for you.
Yep.
As a senior figure within the community, what are you looking for when you speak to somebody new, whether they're professional or students? How did they leave a lasting impression on you? And on the flip side to that, what is your advice? What is Christopher Brown, Dr. Christopher Brown AM's secret ingredients on how to make a positive impression on somebody new, somebody you just met? And how do you make that relationship spark? Because I know that it's all good for us to meet somebody new, but then after it just fizzles out and it's no use. So what's your secret?
And the hardest thing to impart, I suppose, and as I said, I didn't have much technical qualification or skill or learning, but I was sort of born with the gift of the gab or confidence. I have 3 children. 2 of them, could sing for Australia, treat the boards, and one of, dies at the thought of any external engagement. So it's a nurture nature engagement, I'm not sure. So it's hard to tell people how to do that. I think all you can do is put some building blocks in to build to your own level of confidence, your own level of externality. But what makes the impression on me, somebody makes a beeline, I go across the room, says g'day, hand out, eyes up, looking at the face, say g'day, is really good. It's a really important thing. And that's easier for the person with that confidence to just do that, to come and go up and say g'day. Probably the easy thing for those who don't necessarily have that is drop a note afterwards. I didn't get the chance to say hello. I watched you speaking there. I'd like to find something more about that. Anybody can be tracked down these days. And, what am I, as a generation of KFC, or back when we called it Kentucky Fried Chicken when I was young, we weren't afraid to say the word fried, is that the handwritten letter, some of your students might know it's a pen. It's used for writing materials. There's a bit of paper. And when the two come together, it forms a thing called a letter. It is a long-lost art form. As I say to my kids, buy yourself a pen that you feel comfortable writing with, go and get some paper. Neither are hard to obtain or expensive, and write letters to people. Here's the tough bit. Go and find an envelope and get a stamp. You really want to make an impression on me or on somebody these days, send them a letter. What a bizarre concept. And write a personal note. I saw you speak the other day, that was really good, or I want to challenge something you said with respect. I'd like to find out more about blah. It could be, here's my address, here's my email address, here's my phone number. But, it might just be your generation might be too hard to get to paper and pen and envelope and stamp, or at least an email. But always be following up. Always be following up. I know a guy called Robert Peck, who used to be on Melbourne Council years ago, an architect who's the world's greatest networker. For 5 years, he walked between 12 and 12:45 every day up and down Collins Street, Melbourne, bumping into people, saying hello as they were going to lunch. Literally bumped into them, made notes. Tony Shepherd, the chairman of the GWS Giants, the former chairman of the Business Council, CEO of Transfield, etc. Lovely guy, big wig as you're going to get. There's nobody he meets in Sydney who his staff don't call that afternoon saying, Tony would like you to come as his guest to the Giants game sometime this year, and gets them along and networks them and puts people into them. Always be following up. Always have enough effort in you or determination to drop someone a note. Handwritten note, even better. Minimum a phone call, an email, a direct message, whatever you kids do these days. I don't think you'll stalk Tony Shepherd on Instagram, but there must be some old school ways of communicating. But always be following up. Always be thinking, what interests that person? How can I get an in? No one minds. Play to their ego. You are great. It's a great opening to any speech, or you guys don't meet each other in bars anymore, do you? But it's always a good opener, whatever the social setting is. Play to someone, stroke someone's ego without looking like you're being too sloppy and disingenuous. Be knowledgeable about what they care about. Do your homework. Whether you're trying to beat a competitor, if you're trying to get the gig. The amount of people who come into my office for a job, to be honest, who don't even know what we do. I think, why did you bother? Why did you waste your time today? We're not hard to find out about. It's real easy. Be prepared to respectfully challenge somebody. Engage them. That was great, thanks, and move on. Engage them. But I want to take issue with what you said on blah. Don't make a pain in the butt of yourself, but do it respectfully, do it professionally, but engage them, get their mind thinking, oh, that bright young person I met, such and such, or can come back to them, and give them some way to find you. Get yourself a business card. If you don't have one, you don't have to wait till you see someone to get a business card. They're the cheapest thing you'll ever get. Go into one of the snap printing places. You guys know how to do all that. Get yourself a business card. Leave it with everybody you meet. Even if it just says Andrew Fong, International Man of Mystery, and hand it over. Give somebody the contact point. So networking, it comes naturally or not, but it doesn't just fall in your lap. It's another skill set that needs to be worked, needs to be thought about, needs to be nurtured at all times. And it works. It really does work. Build yourself in, and be the person who then nurtures the network. You can't just, lots of people have networks and don't know how to use them. People are born with networks. It's being able to appropriately exploit them, exploit not in a pejorative sense, but exploit to leverage, to use, They're like a garden. You've got to keep working them. You've got to fertilize them. You've got to water them. You've got to be, whether they're your social networks, whether it's with your family, whether it's professionally, it doesn't just happen. It is something you have to work at.
You know, that's very important. This is absolute gold because personally, if I was still studying at university in first year, for instance, and I received this kind of advice, Chris.
I'm Colonel Sanders. I look a bit like Colonel Sanders, so.
You know, it's amazing advice, Chris. So thank you for that. A quick reminder to everyone viewing today, participants, please pop your questions in to the Q&A section below. We'll be heading towards that in no time at all. Chris, you've spoken about how to sustain these networks, right? And you've spoken about, you know, writing these letters to people. And I've done this in the past following your advice. And I found it to be an amazing experience creating and developing my networks personally. And it can be as simple as simply, you know, flicking them a message, trying to remember what it is that they've spoken about, whether, you know, you see it on the news and you say, hey, I saw this and I thought you might be interested. It's very amateur in terms of it's easy to do and it's very effective. So, Chris, thank you for that.
It goes back one. You've got to watch the news in the first place to be able to do that.
And that's true.
With a talented group of young potential future leaders, which is the Academy, watch the bloody news. Stay in touch. Read a newspaper. Turn on the TV at 6 o'clock or better, 7 o'clock, ABC. Not to quit all day, but stay in touch because you can't network if you don't have information. You can't get ahead if you don't know what's going on. And even if you get it, not all great news comes from Facebook. There's other legitimate, we're lucky in this country. News globally is going to the dogs, but we're lucky to still have, despite the extremes sometimes of the Guardian and the Daily Telegraph, there is still genuine news out there, unfiltered, to get involved with. So that you can't do it unless you have. That's the data you need to do this stuff. Is news. Filter it. Use your own mind to filter what's the crap, what's the lies, what's the prejudice within, what's the fake news bit, but still get the news.
You know, and I know that you've in the past have contributed to the ABC, the drum and so forth. So being part of
that's the fake news bit with I'm on it, but the rest of it.
No, I highly doubt that, Chris. The advice and the content.
I noticed Jacob's question online. If you don't mind, I just want to answer that one. It's
of course.
Important point about I mentioned earlier about from where you start. I still have great stories. You've been at a dinner party, and I grew up in Parramatta, but you know, gravitated to the inner cities. You did in those days to get out of the burbs, and did my 1 year at Sydney Uni, then worked in advertising in North Sydney, and blah blah blah. Which is slightly less smelly than working at the abattoirs where I worked before that at Homebush. Is that you go to parties and the conversation would inevitably get to in the city. So, which school did you go to? And you say Cumberland High at Carlingford or Burnside, North Parramatta. Oh, that's it. I'm just going to get a drink. And you'd watch your people's eyes. Westie, quick, take off. And I used to turn to a badge of honour without becoming a dick about it. You know, you literally challenge people a little bit. You know, that sense of just feeling you are worthy to be there is not easy. And you have to, I hate to admit, some ways you need to assimilate to that world a little bit, and some ways you need to assert your own inbuilt authority or point of differentiation. I don't know. We might even get interesting Westies. You know, the Mossman and Bondo types are actually, you know, looking a bit of rough trade or whatever it can be. But I think to be assertive of it, quietly, proudly assertive, not aggressive because it doesn't help anybody, but to find your place in the world is never easy, and everybody will go about it their own way. Mine was to take the piss a little, to not have the special private school uniform that they would all wear, or go to their hangout spots and just, you know, adapt it to you. So effectively, you know, we take the West wherever we go. We take our background, our racial, our geographical backgrounds, our physical backgrounds with us. They're part of our trademark, part of our legacy. I think it's don't cower from them, but aggressively put them in a place, you know, in a way that you want to present yourself.
Yeah, no, and I think you touched upon, you know, briefly there, almost a sense of, you know, what's that word that I'm trying to pick? The imposter syndrome you talked about as well, and trying to be, assimilate into this crowd. And it's something that I've had to almost adapt a little bit myself during university. And you've been a great mentor to me in that.
I can tell you, standing on stage at university, getting on a doctorate, talk about imposter syndrome for a kid with 1 year of economics law.
You're very worthy. I think you're very, very worthy in that.
So shaking like a leaf, thinking. I put it a bit like the scarecrow in Wizard of Oz. Until they gave me a diploma, I didn't ever think I had a brain. So that confidence attack happens to the best of us at all times. But it's another reason why running your network, and to answer Jacob's follow-up question, I tell you, Boak has done pretty good himself of the catalyzer success. But getting a network's one thing. I said before, nurturing it, catalog it, work it, database. I have a database up here. I don't use CRMs. There's one in here everybody ever met and know and keep up with what they're doing. Others will rather use things like LinkedIn. I mean, there is, if you don't have an inbuilt CRM in your brain, use the ones that you can rely upon. Straight on database and CRM. I grew up with actual Teledex. There's a word you'll never hear these days. A list of phone numbers so you can go through it and find. And just work them. Every so often go through. I haven't dropped a note to Barry Blogs in a while. Hey, Barry, how's life going? Or, I see you just got the gig somewhere else, and let me know if there's something I can do to help. Be useful. The most important thing all of us inside could be whether we're useful at a macro global scale or we're useful to the old lady next door who wants you to go and get the groceries. Be useful. And that is the ultimate, I think, civic contribution you can make. And it's a bit selfish too. It gives you both a feeling of, that was nice, I did something nice. I challenge anybody, the best you'll feel ever in any day is when somebody else says something nice to you or about you. Like as a result of you being useful or doing something nice, good or handy for someone else. And networking professionally, that manifests as well. Don't be a suck up, but be useful. Be capacity to be there when needed, to be reliable, to be dependable, to be, I could say to be on time, but I never am, but you should try to be on time. These things all go to the character that you want to employ, that you want to work alongside, that you want to follow, that you want to buy things from, that you want to listen to. And they're things that anybody can do. They're basic human traits. You can be helped by your databases, by your reminders, whatever it does gives you a system that keeps going to the tactical that gets you to the strategic.
Talking about databases, Chris, LinkedIn is an amazing platform and you're on that. And if you don't mind for the students here today to kind of contact you through that, I'm sure that they will be looking you up.
I'm not at it that often, I should say. My staff put things up for me sometimes, and I used to call LinkedIn, Facebook for nerds, where there's two types of people. I want you my friend on Facebook, otherwise you're on LinkedIn. So I don't use it nearly as much as I should. I don't use it nearly as well as I should. I used to say, people contact you on LinkedIn, oh, they must have lost their job. Instantly, have suddenly become available, are on LinkedIn a lot. But that was in the early days. It now has become a genuine form for swapping ideas, well and truly. But while I encourage use of all the technical mechanisms to do that, I don't want to discourage the personal mechanism as well. The handwritten note, the phone call, the email. Email's almost old world communication now. I think they're more important, more impact. They're more direct. So it's not one or the other. It's using everything at your disposal. The handshake and the smile are still the best.
Some very solid advice there. LinkedIn or whatever it is.
And I'm talking to a guy here with the best handshake and smile in Sydney, A Fong.
No, Chris, thank you so much for that. But just quickly, we're going to go over, touch upon what Chris has mentioned about LinkedIn and also the written letter, showing a bit about my experiences with that. I've been able to share a lot of value propositions on LinkedIn with people, whether it be something I see online. It's a great tool, guys. So really utilize that to really grow your network. Personal branding.
If you want to, Andrew, if you see somebody post something that's interesting, respond to them.
No, exactly.
Go to the comments page.
Really good at this, Chris. And
engages people. Go to the comments page. Talk to them about it. So reading's great, but be a more active human. Not just there to watch, there to engage, because there's an expectation on you, mob. You are the best of the best, and you have to step up, and you've got to engage. And it does help get attention from the people that you're trying to reach out to. You're trying to impress, you're trying to get near, trying to sell them something, get a job from them, whatever. Engage them.
No, definitely.
Don't troll them, but engage them.
there's always a platform for that as well. But then here for networking, guys, there you have it, the advice, the secret ingredients to successful networking, in fact, with impacts from Dr. Christopher Brown. Chris, thank you so much for your insight in that for networking, but you're not off the hook yet. There is more. It is all good for us to sit here and discuss, the do's and don'ts of networking. However, it becomes even more difficult when there's, a lack of confidence. So a lack of confidence in ourselves, our abilities, and this often leads us to, almost self-sabotaging our own, success. And we touched upon it a little bit earlier about, this imposter syndrome and so forth. Traditionally, Western Sydney students, and as you would know, you mentioned it just so far in our, talk, that they're talented, they're skilled, but often they shy away from big opportunities, whether they are opportunities with major graduate programs. They're more than qualified to be successful in these opportunities. But it comes down to a lack of self-efficacy that, makes them shy away. And perhaps you could argue that it's mainly caused by negative stereotypes, stigmas of the region, perhaps, such as West is not the best. And there's plenty of this, right? So, however, and you would know, they are ranked number 1 Western Sydney graduates in New South Wales by employers, and it's widely documented. It's proof that in the region, these students from Western Sydney can get the job done and at a very, very high level. Chris, you've employed alumni from Western Sydney in the past. So what do you see in Western Sydney graduates? Like what and how can they overcome
resilience? Yeah. The fact they've got there, they've had to do. I see a naturalness. It's not the faux made up. Gee, I care for the world from my middle class existence. I see lived experience. See, Russ, part of my business is running an association for Western Sydney, and so we should be employing people of the region, particularly young potential leaders of the region. But there's just something that, and it's not in all of them. I see some who I think your story's great, but I'm going to need you to have more confidence to be in here because it's a tough place. 12 staff, you stand out pretty easily. Katie Walker, our most recent employee, is just a pocket rocket who is just driving us from the most junior member of staff, is leading existential debate about council culture, about gender balance, you name it, challenging me on a daily basis. But she's bright and perky and popping up and wanting to help and being very useful, and she doesn't have a born to rule syndrome that comes along. So, and I'm not saying this well, that old school, that networking works against us too. There's plenty of, Mossman, Bellevue here, old boys and old girls who only employ their own. So, don't be thinking just because you up and smile and you're going to get the gig, because you will be fighting against some prejudice. We were challenged recently. A young woman applied for a job in our office who came in full burqa. And, we had to go through this whole, now she wasn't going to get, I'd say lucky, weren't faced with the full existential debate. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that required in us a thinking that through personal stuff in the office or to clients. And I was delighted we were challenged like that, because it's the workplace is a dynamic, very special. We spend more time there than at home, and they should be challenging. And challenged by our office in an old heritage building, it's not disability accessible at the moment. Now, for a person to spend half his life advocating disability issues, challenged by that, but we're not able to modify it because of the challenge of heritage. So there's all these things that come along that can challenge that. But again, it comes back to those base fundamentals of looking and for me, it's seeing in some Western Sydney kids. I start by wanting to employ you, so you'll get it, except by if there's some other dynamic comes along. But it's show me always you've done something more than just tick the box and got your degree. Because frankly, I don't care. I mean, I don't mean to be anti-education at all, but I'm anti-scholarship in some way that doesn't include lived experience, extra mile, civics, outside the defines of academic curricula, because once you leave university, you'll never have another place like university. You know, you'll have to actually meet challenges, work more cooperatively with people, convince clients, convince customers, convince regulators. So you've got to show that you can operate outside those confines, and that's what I want to see.
Yeah, no, and it is these people skills that are almost, you know, the tool and almost the key that propels people forward. And Chris, you've touched upon that. So some very solid advice, guys. And you mentioned Katie Walker. Katie Walker is going to be featuring in one of our series, so down the track. So stay tuned, guys, for that. We'll be promoting that in the coming weeks.
The girl from Greystanes, she's a cracker.
Member of the Academy as well. She's part of the Generation West. And this is a great segue, Chris, to almost talk about, so I want to talk about the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue for a second. You started a not-for-profit think tank of the region. It's incredibly influential. You've got big hitters from both government and the community come in and contribute to your not-for-profit dialogue. It's dedicated in advocating for, you know, the voice of the people of Western Sydney. Can you tell us more about the work that you do, the dialogue does, and what's your vision you have for Western Sydney?
The dialogue is, as you said, a not-for-profit think tank. Its character is to be bold and out there and aggressive and tested. But generation, you know, some things we do, our policy and research programs. We do hold major events, summits, and others, talk things through. We run campaigns, whether it's a major infrastructure. At the moment, our new campaign is going to be digital equity in education. You know, the latest transgression against the West is young students who can't access online environments. And with respect, they're probably not academy, some might be, they're largely not academy students. They're kids on the Clontarf Indigenous program in schools, or they're kids in public high schools somewhere who can't get to the library to get online access. So it's all that type of campaigning we do, and try to harness a voice for the West it's not only in front of governments, in front of media and reputational issues. It's in front of bureaucrats for policy. It's in front of investment to try and get the companies to want to employ and get engaged. It's to back our big institutions like WSU in the region. So, and Gen West is our youth advisory group, which you sit on, Andrew, and a few other members of the academy, like Naomi and others who've been involved. And it's run by Katie and Catherine Nguyen in our office, who sadly is a UTS student, but she's a girl from Bankstown, so she slipped through the net that way.
She kind of qualifies.
I'm a former adjunct at UTS, an honorary doctor at WSU, and I did 12 months of economics law at Sydney, so I spread myself around the academic world without actually doing anything academic. But Gen West is interesting, challenged us now. We hold two major gong gigs a year. One's the delivery of the Lachlan Macquarie Lecture, and the other is the presentation of the Pemulwuy Prize, named after what I think are the two most significant historic figures in Western Sydney in the past few hundred years. Pemulwuy, the original tribal warrior who fought the British and was remarkable. Came from southern Sydney, ended up around the Greystanes area, based. And Lachlan Macquarie, who was interestingly, the only governor ever to become a Sir, because he was a Scotsman. He bucked the system. I love him because he's the first people to bring convicts into the court, and the establishment couldn't stand him. But we've discussed, Andrew, you and I, your proud heritage of the boat people concept. Mine were boat people too, but they were involuntary tourists at the bottom of ships in manacles 225 years ago. And so these two people we try to honour. And now it's a challenging thing at the moment. The Gen West has said to us, with support, particularly for some Indigenous students who were there, that it's inappropriate to be honouring Lachlan Macquarie. We're having a really big debate internally at the moment how we do that.
I think we're having some difficulty with Chris's connection there. But while we wait for Chris to connect again with us as he joins, we're getting some very good questions coming through, touching upon Chris's response just now. It is very important to. Oh, hey, Chris,
Am I
got you back. You're back.
How far did I get to through my monologue when you lost me?
Just pick up from where you believe you cut off, because I actually don't recall.
Talking about the challenge about the Lachlan Macquarie lecture and whether it's appropriate, because he was also responsible for the declaration of the Appin Massacre, which killed a bunch of Indigenous folk in the 1800s. And so we've determined now that the next lecture we'll do will be by an Indigenous speaker, and we'll confront the issue, because that's what we should be doing. We're called a dialogue. We should be talking about it. To simply cancel it, move on and hide it would also be stupid as to proudly go on and ignore it. So we're going to address it. And it's getting pushed by our youth advisory group. That's great. I gave them one mandate when you set up, Andrew, which will scare me a little. Don't be boring, bland, a bunch of young fogies. Get out there and push the envelope and challenge us to respond to this. Is a classic case. And it's been tremendous. So the dialogue is, that's what it's there for, to promote the hopes and visions for particularly young people coming through Western Sydney, to fundamentally change. We change the way it's planned at the moment. We're changing the way it's governed. We need to change the way it's considered, not only by the rest of Sydney, but by our own people. I've lost sound from you, Andrew. I can't hear you.
Yeah, no. Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Yes.
I can hear you now.
Technology issues, right? It's all become custom to us during COVID.
Digital equity.
There you go. Stay tuned.
Against us again.
Stay tuned with Chris about that. You've spoken about the dialogue and how it's been so provocative in terms of starting that dialogue with different people and being that voice for our region. And I think, and if you're happy for the students who are viewing today to kind of reach out to the organisation and be a part of that, I'll provide the details to the students below. After our session, this is being recorded, so I'll do some communication afterwards. But Chris would like to, perhaps go into Q&A.
In the Out There Summit on August 6th. It's online. Yes. It's being held during Education Week. It has a little bloke you might know of called Peter Shergold kicks off. Shergy. There's Mark Scott, the head of education, Stephen Forby, the head of TAFE, Anthony Manning from Schools Infrastructure, Lillian Gordon, Aboriginal Affairs. A range of people are involved and speaking. It's meant to be a confronting debate for about 2 hours or so on education, skills, jobs. So it's on the morning of August 6th. So I'm assuming everybody's getting their pen and paper and writing that down and putting their phone as we speak. And come back through Andrew to encourage people to get involved. You're most welcome to sit in on that discussion and get involved in the debate therein.
Yeah, this is great, guys. It's an incredible opportunity to be there. We are discussing the future of Western Sydney here, and it's great to be part of that dialogue. So the Academy will be promoting this through our Facebook and our weekly e-newsletter. So stay tuned for that. Chris, thank you so much so far. But again, we're not just done yet. There is Q&A, so we'll just move on to that. We are getting questions coming through. So if you're okay to answer them, let me just see. So there is one question from Brett here. And I believe Brett is from your dialogue, Chris.
Brett's asking me questions in the team meeting.
So he's asking you here, and I think it's a very good question, actually. So if you're a junior person within a meeting and you've got a very passionate topic that you want to, voice within a meeting that are, made up of people that are more senior than you, how do you muster the courage to sound assertive, but not so be, come off as snob and ignorant?
And I think that's a similar question from Yona as well. So I said, it's easy for me to talk about being confident. I was born that way. I wasn't born with much skill. I was born with that, and I've developed along the way, but I started at that level. So I'm loath to tell people that just front up and smile and stick your hand out, because there can sometimes be nothing more devastatingly scary than meeting new people, polite conversation, public speaking, all these things I love. I recognise is probably not normal, and most people some people are scared in that front. So go back to the things I said. Make yours a written form. If you don't have the personality, strength yet, or confidence to front up, use the power of the pen or of the keyboard to do it. Start with people where you are confident. Practice. Through practice. I talk about if you're going to make your first big speech, make sure you get 2 or 3 friends sitting in the front row. smiling at you, nodding, encouraging you to come along. But practice these things. They are learnable skills. Yes, they're innate in some ways, but they're also, you can learn and hone that skill set by do it within the academy, do it amongst your friend set, do it at home with your family, work on it. And little by little, you'll build those building blocks that get you to that level. But again, maybe use the written form in the first place if you're concerned about the one-on-one contact.
And that's some very
Use
good
the
advice.
tools, online tools that are there to enable that.
Yeah, the world's your oyster, and there's so many resources available to you these days. It was a lot harder back in your day, I think, Chris. Moving on to a different question, Pauline, you mentioned a question here.
I heard back in my day. I remember that.
Yeah, and no, Pauline, you touch upon a question here, and it's something that Jonathan will touch on more in detail on Friday. So I'll leave that for later. There's one question.
Describe the academy. It's the best of the best of the West. It is an elite organisation, and I know that it's not elitist, and they're very different. You should always be proud to be elite, never be elitist. And it is where the future leaders of Western Sydney are currently housed, learning, training. It's where my successor works currently. It's where our staff coming from. It's where the region needs you to stand up. So that's how you describe it, proudly.
No, the academy is very amazing, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a staff member. Yona.
And I'm not saying just the academy, I'm saying the internal part of the academy. There's too many members of the academy who are happy to wear the academy tag and not get involved in the academy. They're the ones I'm a bit cranky with, who don't turn up, who don't front up, who don't do a bit extra, who don't get involved in citizen scholar programs. They're using the academy in the wrong way. I'd happily have Jonathan knows this, a smaller academy with a tighter, more elite cohort that are prepared to go beyond. It's a great investment uni makes the academy members. Some of those academy students need to put a little back into the system as well.
And that's a good point. There are a lot of opportunities out there, and I encourage everybody here, part of the academy, to be more involved. That's how you make the most out of your opportunities here at university. Moving on to the next question, Chris. Yona asks, what would you advise individuals with more shy or conservative personalities in starting to network? How do you begin networking?
That's what I was to say before. Start maybe by using technology to do it. Practice at home. Networks are building blocks, so you can build one and that stretches out to another couple. So start modestly, but keep working it. That's how.
Very good answer there. And Becca asks, I know we've spoken about this a little bit before, but he asks, what are some platforms by which we can contact others, find events, get in contact with professionals?
Find out their industry magazines, their newsletters. They all exist. Go to the industry association, whether it's egg farming, engineering, or academic excellence. Do a bit of research. The one advantage is, when I was a kid, do some research when going to the Encyclopedia Britannica books in the front room of the house, if you're lucky enough, and go through and weren't updated for 20 years. You guys just have to hit bloody Google. In fact, you even say it on Google. So, research. Turn off Tiger King for a while and tune into Google, do a bit of research, and then track them down. As an industry association, industry newsletters, that's important. Groups on Facebook or things, industry groups, a whole range of ways.
So would you advise them, researching these people in advance and reaching out virtually if they wanted to get in contact with professionals in their respective fields?
Yeah, track them down, find the people that matter, go and talk to them. You'll have better than a Mormon strike rate, but knock it on the door and 1 out of 100 families let you in the door, and maybe a better strike rate I used to have at the bar as a kid. But you literally keep asking. Don't be put off by it. Ask respectfully and keep doing it. Don't give up. It is a lifetime commitment to network. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen, as they used to say.
It is a long innings, networking. And Chris, a bit of a question for you here. Is there any hobbies that you engage in that works with networking? Because Cameron asked, do I need to learn how to play golf to effectively network?
Not anymore. You got to cycle these days. Got one of those mammals, men in lycra or whatever, middle-aged men in lycra. Ugh. Your hobby should be putting yourself forward, reading, staying up to date, read the news, getting engaged in public policy. Hobbies, yeah. It's not golf anymore. I still like a bit of golf every so often, but no, it's not golf. Information's the new golf.
I think Q&A now. I think you're tuning on a Monday evening on a Q&A, getting trendy on Twinder. Not Twinder.
That's
Twitter.
a whole different thing. I'm
Yeah,
sure
that's a
you're
whole
trending
different
on
thing.
Twitter and
Oh
on
my
Tinder,
goodness.
Andrew.
It's too early in the morning. Anyway, it's Twitter, getting trended on Twitter.
It's better to trend on Tinder, but it's okay to trend on Twitter.
Oh, this is going to haunt me. But anyway, so moving on to the next question with Becca as well. He
It's a
speaks
whole
about
different networking.
it is. Yeah, it is. Anyway, so we spoke about the reputation of Western Sydney, Chris, and there's a question here about whether or not this will affect future opportunities because of this reputation of Western Sydney. Would explosive
It'll affect it
professionals...
positively. It's getting better.
Yeah.
You guys got a much better chance than my generation had coming through, the baggage of Western Sydney. And maybe that baggage just moved out, concentric circles out. I appreciate you walk into a meeting and say you're from Blacktown. I go, yes. And, the majority will still go, ugh. That's a reality. Partly, if it's a job in the city, there's a thought of the commute time. You can have people accessible. We all want staff who can live 3 metres from the office, trust me, until the point they're all work from home now, so it doesn't matter. So maybe telecommuting is the great solution, the last of the ways to address the tyranny of distance in Western Sydney, unless we suffer digital inequity. If we can get thing that might be the great leveller. It doesn't matter where you live and where you live in your computer. It's not a very attractive way to live a life, but it might take on one of those last disadvantages that kids in the West face in gaining employment. But I think the reputation's getting better. We're getting a reputation for being innovative, smart, resilient part of Sydney, not more lazy trust fund type. It's the way that private school kids who've come through being nurtured, spoon-fed, their entry to uni are failing compared to Western Sydney kids and public school kids who've had to fight to get there. It might be harder to get there, but they do better when they're there because they come in with an inbuilt resilience. Somehow we need to keep that resilience when you go out again.
And employers in New South Wales do rate our graduates, as I mentioned earlier, number 1. So that's a very good point there. And Chris,
I do.
Yeah, no. And Western Sydney it's growing very fast. Everybody's moving towards Western Sydney. We see people from the east come aboard and enter the region. So,
West is the new West.
No, West is the hot spot, and everybody. Well, it's a very topical, I think, word at the moment. But it's a great place to be at the moment, the West. So we have a question here from Summer. So it asks, as an international student from the US, I am concerned that I won't be able to stand out enough in jobs and networking. Do you have any advice that could help me? So for international students, Chris, what's your advice for them? Because I know you've got experience in tourism and this global citizenship. So what's your advice for Summer?
I don't see the link between being an international student in the US and not standing out, because most likely will more likely stand out, I suppose. But let me take it on assuming without assuming as to why Summer thinks it's a she. Summer wouldn't stand out. Make yourself stand out. So do things. I'd say, if everyone puts a CV together. Most people have at some stage. Put a photo on it. And I don't mean just because you're a supermodel, the photo is going to make you look good. But when I meet you in an interview, I've already seen, I automatically have a greater degree of comfort in the meeting. Oh, I know that. Where have I seen that person before? I've seen them from the damn photo on their thing. So it takes out immediately that first bit of awkwardness. But I don't mean do your Kardashian selfie. I mean a professional photo and attached to your CV. It just simply, you get a stack of everything. It suddenly stands out a little more. It's already giving you a slight advantage to be noticed, and go that way. Things like in your CV as well, stand out with reverse it. So you'll do the date of birth, her academic experience, extracurricular up in front. Flip it. Start your CV with. You'll come to all the other stuff later, over the boxes I've ticked academically. Let's start with me as a human being and what I believe in. What are my values? What do I do? Put it up front. Don't hide it at the back in the annex. Launch with that. I just thought that up then. I think it's a pretty good idea. We should do that. That should be the way. That's what I'm going to read more. It's a photo on it. There's here's my values, family, structure, whatever. Just break out of the mold. Anyone who tells you, here's the formula for a CV, ignore them. Because any job who wants that form rejects you because of that formulaic approach not being there, you don't want to work there. And your academy should. You work anywhere you want to work. So go and work for places in which you share their values. You don't all have to be the CEO in the first year you get there. So settle down, millennials and Gen Y, and settle into the job. But you do have the right to respect the values, the organisation's there, and you have the expectation to put your values up front, because that's the bit I want to read. So don't hide it at the back of your 3-page CV, or in Andrew's case, your 12-page CV.
No, and it's great advice that you provided, because I remember, having spoken to you, and you went over my CV once and you said, Andrew, just put your achievements, your extracurricular at the very front, and it's worked very well for me so far. So guys, take on this advice. It's absolute gold. So thank you, Chris. We've got a question from David here. He asked, I know we've touched upon this earlier, Chris, but he asked, according to your professional experience, do you value experiences, I'm guessing here, beyond the classroom and in the professional setting more than
it's all I value
themselves?
It's predominantly what I value.
Yep.
Your experience, your extracurricular, there's something that stands out from the crowd. Literally, there's tens of thousands of you who've got credit, distinction on your technical. And Jonathan, close your ears for a second. Yes, the academic stuff does matter. Absolutely, it does. But the other stuff, I'm not employing a robot. I'm employing a human being. I want to know about the human. I want to hang out with that human being. I want to have a different experience than mine that I can learn from and go in the mix. I want to trust that human being. I want to know their values. Now, that mightn't be the case if you're going to be in the audit team at a Big Four accounting practice. They might want or train drivers where, there's a story where they can't get female train drivers because the long distance coal drivers, because the ultimate compliment is to their negative. Women are too innovative. They need an automotive who sit there and change nothing on a long distance train. And you have to sometimes go to the toilet while the train's moving in the outback, and it's harder, obviously, anatomically. But this thing about they can't employ women because they're so innovative, they want to change stuff, and it's the only job where change is anathema, because change makes trains crash. But in all other things, I want people who want to change things, who want to innovate, who want to bring new ideas. So that's important to me.
And this comes from experience. And Chris, I realize that we're running out of time, but I'll go through a couple more questions if you don't mind.
Go for it. Is Brett still online? I've got a team meeting. Tell him I'll be late, a few minutes late, Brett.
Sorry, Brett. We'll keep him for not much longer. There's a question from Amy here, and she asked, hi, Chris. We meet an extensive range of people throughout our lives, particularly within an employment context. My question is, do you need to be selective and differentiate between who is an acquaintance and a part of your network? Or do you attempt to cultivate everyone? And if so, how do you know who to put more effort into? So is there some prioritizing there, Chris?
No, I think you need to prioritize who's in your network and who's your friends. And again, generationally, friends aren't people who want to celebrate things. That's the distinction. Everyone's in.
Chris, sorry, you've broken out a little bit there. Could you repeat what you've just said? Yep, you're back now.
Yeah, you need to distinguish between network and friends. That's the distinction. Friends are people you rely upon when you need to talk to somebody, when you celebrate with, you want to share emotional moments with, you want to go out with, you name it. Network and colleagues are different, acquaintances are different, and they're all the same. They're all part of your broader network. Now, your friends can be colleagues, can be associates, etc., but that's the distinction you want to make. The rest of everybody's fair game. They're all up to be part of your network. They won't all be used equally. They won't all have value to you. You won't have value to all of them equally, but that's your network. But separate that from your friends.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. And we've got a question from Anonymous here. From the
it's
field
always scary, anonymous ones.
Always scary. We get them a lot. So from the field of physiotherapy, what would be an effective way to network, do you think? Would it be very similar to any other industry, reaching out, doing your research?
And I've only had physiotherapy, not been a physiotherapist. But everything has a network. Now, if you're going to stay within the physiotherapy world, which firstly, almost nobody stays in their lane anymore. So everything's your network. You know, physiotherapy one day. I mean, the current head of the Federal Treasury during a time of global pandemic and the biggest economic crisis the world's ever faced is a former psychiatric nurse, Stephen Kennedy. You know, now there's a journey. So anybody can be anything, anywhere, at any time. But if you want to stay within your physiotherapy lane, then get involved. I'm sure there's a physiotherapist association. There are newsletters. There are professional gigs. There is competitors you can reach out to respectfully. Well, the fidelity of your own employer. Absolutely, everything has a network, a superstructure, an architecture around it. It's up to us to, you know, climb on, find the front door, the back door, get in somehow and get involved with it, and in all walks of life, including physiotherapy.
Yeah, be curious, you know, be proactive, reach out to different
Always
people.
be curious.
Research. Always be curious.
Trade on earth is curiosity.
For the man himself,
Followed by
be curious.
reliability.
That's it. And there's another question here from Cameron, actually, and he asks, what are your favorite activities or projects you want to see on people's resumes? We talked about, you know, having the extracurricular at the very top, your achievements and so forth. But what kind of particular, you know, experience items that you particularly look for?
Political involvement. I'd say I don't care which politics I do, but for the sake of this argument, political involvement. I mean, small p. Get involved in your local council, state government, writing a campaign on something. The less obvious on sporting's obviously, but I think beyond that, editorially, for students, are you involved in writing? Are you in the student newspaper? Have you taken on that type of areas that shows this knowledge above and beyond? Community group, helping somebody else, mentoring. You know, we've just given away all these scholarships to young high school kids who suffer enormous disadvantage, a range of family dysfunction, economic disadvantage, physical disability, you name it. And, you know, the one thing was almost common amongst all of these kids for whom you read their CV, I talk to them and think, oh God, how can I help? Like, you know, how can I help make up for the poor stuff you've had to go through without pitying, wanting to help? And almost every one of them has on their CV the mentoring they do for other kids. And it's the most humbling thing you'll ever see, to think, you poor bugger, I just wanted to help you and save you, and you're busy out saving other people. So mentoring others, being useful to helpful to others, that's the thing that gets me most. That because then I can trust them with my business. I can trust them with my colleagues. I want them in my family. That inherent trust that comes through the characters, values of them wanting to get involved and be helpful.
That sense of giving back and that sense of duty to others is a great trait to have.
Some old school views that I think remain just like the pen and paper. There's some other old school things that remain valid today.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Chris, thank you so much. There's one final question before we wrap up, and I'll hand over to Jonathan then. So there's a question here. We've spoken about HDs and high distinctions and how that's very important. And you're very busy yourself, you know, running a lot of different events, meetings, and so forth. What's your advice in terms of, you know, balancing time? How do you really engage in so many different things?
Bend time. I'm like a time lord from Doctor Who. Bend time to get it done. Rely on others. You've got to squeeze it in. I don't sleep a lot, which helps as well. So, you know, sort of late night. It's hard to say. For me, I can always be on, and it doesn't affect me. I don't need the, and that's a personality. I don't need the strong separation. I need 5 minutes of downtime, and I'm back again. You know, and that helps. And that's not going to be for everybody. In fact, it's not healthy, I'm sure. But that's me. But manage your time well. I like to write myself notes. I use this thing for constantly sending myself emails so things don't get forgotten. I bump into somebody, must call Harry Blogs tomorrow. Send myself a note. In my case, send it to my EA as well, who helps manage that time, or some of the team. And relying upon the CRM in the brain to try and remember stuff. But sometimes you've got to bend time. You've got to make time. So I keep telling you, Andrew, make more time for you and less time for others sometimes. And remember that, you know, stop, look up. You know, if it's a rainy day as it's been, or a stormy night, or a quiet, go outside, take in a bit of nature for 3 minutes. I guarantee it's the greatest way to revive yourself and get back into it again. But always be working it, always be thinking about it, always be writing it down. Unless you're the type who needs total separation to get all namaste zen, that's fine. It's not for me, but find your own mechanism that keeps you sustained, keeps you in the game, and keeps you on your game.
Thanks, Chris. We've got, so I'm so sorry to do this, but there's a very good question that just came through. Uh, Western Sydney is a multicultural region, Chris, and we all know this, and there's a lot of different cultures there. In terms of networking, how do you do that effectively without, offending anybody?
I don't see the next multiculturalism as an offence. I mean, there's certain cultural norms we need to be conscious of. When you're handing out certificates on stage at a graduation ceremony, you've got to look out, particularly for the young Muslim women, whether the hand comes out or not. There's cultural offence can be provided by different ways. I don't think it's appropriate to pitch anyone on the bum anymore, let's be honest. Society has evolved and changed, and our language and our practices should adapt with it. I'm also the camp, though, we all need a little bit of resilience as well. I mean, if it's not intentional racism caused, I think it's beholden on all of us. I mean, it was beholden on me not to punch a guy in the nose when he'd say, "Which school do you come from?" and they walked off when I said somewhere in Western Sydney. It was beholden upon me to convince them that that's a good thing, not a bad thing. We've got to find our case respectfully and progressively. The same can be said for race, for gender, for anything. The balance of switch, as it should have, mostly to be people being more respectful of that, but we can't give up the responsibility we all have. Andrew, you to tell your story, me to tell my story, everybody to tell their story and listen to other people's stories. And we all learn along the way. The outrage culture, I'm a little concerned about because it stops us actually being forced to change people's minds. We simply call them a bigot, hang up the phone and walk away. Doesn't help either side. Sometimes you got to punch them in the nose, let's be honest. There will come time when it's beyond normal civil discourse, but the majority is simply, let's get involved, let's be advocates in everything we do. Let's make it a richer, deeper, friendlier place to be. And it's on us to do that.
It's be yourself, be proud of who you are, and that's the essence of it all. So, Chris,
I've got to go. Before I go, I want to say thanks to you, my friend Jonathan, as well. Andrew, you are a networker extraordinaire. So you just interview yourself on this thing, give people as much background and knowledge. And to watch you, say, for example, on the trip to London, you came with us, and to come in with full of imposter syndrome on the first day. That when you're almost arrested for being in civil rights marches in London, when you're meant to be just sightseeing. Getting involved at all times helps. But you're an example of what they could be. You've soaked up every positive thing out of the academy it can do, and even post student career still doing that. And it's an indictment of others who don't take that opportunity that's there. Everybody should, and learn from your experience the way you've worked it so remarkably.
Chris, thank you so much. You're very kind. But before we head off and leave you, Jonathan's going to do a vote of thanks, and we're going to launch a poll for the participants. Thank you, Chris.
Cool.
So thanks, Chris, and thanks, Andrew, and wow. So we're putting up a poll, so please feel free to answer those questions to help us improve these sessions as we go through. I can't get rid of the poll because it's crossed my... Oh, there we can see now. I'd like to give a vote of thanks to Christopher Brown, AM, Chairman of Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue, Executive Chair of Taylor Street Advisory, former Pro-Chancellor of Western Sydney University, a member of the Academy Advisory Board, and all-round champion of the Academy and Western Sydney. And one of our family, I like to think too. And you touched on so many things that resonate so strongly with the Academy. We believe in education beyond curriculum, and it's good to know that that counts so much in your world too. And I think that you've given us a new tagline: the Academy is the best of the West. I love that, and we'll use that to our advantage, I'm sure. Now, I'll
send a small consultancy fee through to go with it.
We'll send you a beer. Chris, you received an honorary doctorate from Western Sydney last year, and they say to get a doctorate, you've got to produce something original and interesting. But to be awarded an honorary one, you have to be original and interesting. And I think you've shown that today, and thank you so much. As one comment online said, he's awesome, so real. And I would wholeheartedly endorse that. So
who was that? How do I find them? So you see it works. Instantly, I'm engaged by this person.
I think that might be the Twitter or Tinder. Yes,
Were I not married, I could be engaged to this person.
So thank you so much, and thank you, Andrew. Well done for hosting. I think you did an awesome job. hopefully you don't leave the Academy for a new career in this endeavour, but you've done very well. And thanks to the Academy team, particularly Liz and Carolyn in the background.
Yeah.
And thank you all for participating and asking some great questions. We'll catch you for the next one.
Best of the West.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you guys for joining.
See you, mate.
See you.
Bye.